Hi, my name is Jenna Aiken, and this is my final project for Lifespan Developmental Psychology with Dr. Reiser, and this is my beliefs versus my truth. So the first topic that I wanted to talk about is attachment. I had always believed that attachment was based on your parent, especially the mother, and that you were either attached and you had a relation with your mom or you didn't. In chapter 4 of the textbook, from pages 110 to 111, Belsky goes through and describes the different types of attachment as being secure or insecure. And in secure attachment, children use their mom as a base. They get distressed when she leaves. They light up with joy when she returns. And I had always believed that this was the only attachment that a child could have because that's all I've ever known with my mother. We're very close, and I depend on her as my rock. And I didn't know that kids who didn't have a secure attachment still technically had an attachment to their parents, but that's been changed. So I had always believed that if kids did not have a secure attachment, then they had no attachment, and I learned that that's untrue, that children still have an attachment, it's just classified as insecure. And there are different types of insecure attachment, and the textbook goes on to explain that avoidant is where infants do not have any emotions toward their parents. Anxious ambivalent is where the child is frantic, or the parent is there and they leave and return, and the child is still going to be frantic and to the point where they're unconsolable from anyone, especially their caregiver. And then there's disorganized attachment, and that's where they behave bizarrely and run around and look frightened when the caregiver returns or leaves. It's just, you never know how their behavior is going to be. It's very erratic and just disorganized. And so those are all the different types of insecure attachment. And I found another study that was based on early emotional abuse, and it was talking about that children who develop an insecure attachment due to early abuse or neglect or stressors are later going to have negative influence on their social functioning, psychological distress, self-esteem, and potential to make secure relationships romantically or otherwise. So even though that most of the cases of these problems are due to insecurity, I learned that there's still an attachment there, even though I had not believed that before. Alright, so the second topic that I want to discuss is family stress and the role it plays on development. I've always known that children were more apt to have to step up and take over the role of being their caregiver in their family if they went through traumatic experiences, and if they didn't have a super constant caregiver there, then these people were more prone to develop faster mentally because I had seen it happen. I actually had a friend in elementary school that had to take on a motherly role to herself, and she was often neglected, and she had just seen and heard things at a young age that she should have never really have, and she knew so much more about the world than I did at that time and had already lost some of her innocence and her imagination and just had to step up into that role early. So the textbook discusses in chapter 8 around page 233 how adolescents, especially girls, are going to develop quicker both physically and mentally when intense childhood stress or negative mother-headed households are at play. So I learned that girls, and maybe even my friend, were more likely to start reaching menarche at an earlier time. And this is true because my friend did start her stages of puberty around age 9, and she was almost fully developed by the time that we were 11. And I learned that the reason behind this is why girls, like my friend or other people I know, were both more mentally and physically developed than I was at age 9. And I had believed it was just them having to step up into that role, but their bodies also changed at early time because every girl is different. So by learning the truth, I've realized that maybe our social aspects are maybe not always what causes it. It could be biologically or just stepping up physically based on the traumatic experiences you've been through and everything. It just varies. So the third topic that I wanted to discuss is how children play outside and play fantasy. As a child, I had always went and played outside with my neighbors, and I had believed that my mom just wanted me to do this so she could get me out of the house for a while, or so that I could get some exercise, or an hour of me time for the day. But I didn't know the reason that she did this was so it would improve my psychological development. In chapter 5, Belsky discusses how playing or pretending changes us for the better socially, physically, and mentally. Mentally, playing helps kids to develop a better theory of mind, and that's where children get a cognitive understanding that other people have different beliefs and perspectives than their own. Socially, kids take part in fantasy or exercise play outside with their neighbors or classmates at recess. Physically playing outside helps develop the gross motor skills, which is the abilities that use large muscle movements like running and jumping. So after learning all of this, I realized that my belief before of why we played outside or why I'd always done things like that was very narrow-minded, and that there's many benefits to playing outside or having this fantasy play or the rough and tumble play or anything like that. And so those benefits were offered to me through my neighbors and through the kids at recess, and I just didn't realize that that was what the truth was. So the fourth misconception that I'd had was over the nature versus nurture debate. I had always heard and believed that nature and nurture was a debate and that most people had to side with one or the other. And I've always heard of this debate through class and reading like Lord of the Flies in high school, but nobody had ever talked about how the two ideas could be a collaboration. And I never heard that before until I was reading in Belsky, the textbook, in chapter 1, around page 18, she started stating that nature and nurture combine to get psychology where it's at today. And the textbook explains that nature and nurture interact and shape our life together. First, our nature shapes our nurture. That means that our genetic tendencies shape our wider world experiences through evocative and active forces. And second, we need the right nurture to fully express our nature. So a goal of this is to have the correct person-environment fit, and that's where the wider world is bringing out our best human. So in other readings that I found a topic that described nature versus nurture as being settled by developmental psychologists because they're in concert to shape developmental pathways and outcomes, and nature and nurture do this from health to behavior to competence, and basically they just do this to interact over the course of development and just always collaborate together. And so through finding out this truth and this topic, my mind has been changed to see the nature and nurture collaboration, and I can start to see and believe how they work together and not have to just pick a debate and just be so one-sided and so ready to argue when they can really go together, especially in the psychological world. All right, so the fifth and final topic that I wanted to talk about is menopause. I've always heard and believed that menopause is a negative thing that women go through in our lives, and that was just through because media's views are always negative. You always hear negative comments from friends or family members that have gone through it, and so that's just what I'd always believed, that menopause is not a good thing. It doesn't help us and everything. It's just like something we go through, and it's just get through it and everything. But after reading the section in chapter 12 of the textbook, I realized that menopause is not always a bad thing. Belsky explains that menopause typically occurs around age 50, and it's when our estrogen production declines dramatically, and so that means that women will eventually stop ovulating, and they're eventually going to stop having periods and all of that kind of stuff. They just become irregular, and eventually it just stops all out, and that can last up for like a year, all this irregular behavior or more. Just depends on the person. And while menopause does lead to negative stereotypes, they're not all as true or dramatic as they seem to be. But women do experience hot flashes and minor physical pains, and there's a slight rise in anxiety, and overall it's just a new stage in life, but it can be positive if you let it. So an article I found from Good Health speaks about loving your postmenopause body, and it explains that if we're lucky enough to live to be 80, we're not going to look so great. But we need to be putting our self-esteem and other things in appearance, especially after going through this like stage in life of menopause. And then we need to view menopause as an opportunity to move forward and to appreciate our life and focus on our futures. So take the time to focus on the things that have brought us to the point of going through menopause and to where we are now, and look at the positive things that it's brought you, these bodily changes. You have love and a partner and a home you've produced through all this, and you've produced kids through this, and friends that you can relate to, and just other priceless blessings. So now you might not be building those things anymore, but you still get to cherish them and look back on them And so that's something that menopause can show us, is that even though you may be going through this now and you already have gone through these things, look at how much you've gained from it. So just from learning all of this and reading this article, I now have a better view on what menopause is, and just learning these facts has shown me that like what it really does for our bodies, and that it doesn't always have to be negative, even though there are symptoms or side effects or whatever, but they're not all bad. And overall, it's a good thing. It's like women empower women, like, and that's what my truth showed me. So I definitely feel like taking this developmental psych course has taught me a whole lot, and it's shown me so many things of ways that I can live my life better, and how I want to parent my kids one day, and different ways that I can view people and their perspectives and their cultures, just through what's going on in their minds and their bodies, whether that's like mentally and physically and socially, and studying different things and different perspectives that I have on attachment and family stress and children playing and nature versus nurture and menopause have just shown me that things that we believe and are told are not always true. Sometimes they're myths, or sometimes we don't have the whole truth, or sometimes we only focus on media's negative things. So it just feels good to see a scientific basis and like other scholarly sources basis of different ideas, and just how changing our beliefs can still be, our morals and our truths, but overall there can be scientific truths and other people's truths, and they can still be right, or like certain things don't have to be debated, they can be good. And just like we said, collaboration of nature versus nurture and all of that. So overall, I feel like doing this project has really changed my perspective, and is going to change my perspective in the future, that we always need to get a whole background or a better background over something than we do just regularly. And overall, I've enjoyed it and hope to learn more in the future of my psychology degree.